Welcome to the Council of Better Business Bureau's podcast, Better Business, Better Series, where we will explore top-of-mind topics with business and industry leaders to understand the leading trends and innovations that continue to push the envelope in today's marketplace.
For the Better Business, Better Series podcast, I'm Will Johnson. For anyone running a business, starting a business, or just trying to connect with and engage an audience or potential customers, social media has to be a part of the business strategy. But knowing where to start, how to reach the right audience, and what message to convey can be a daunting task. 2018 promises to bring small and large shifts in the social media landscape. Joining us today to talk about how to bring a social media strategy into focus is James Williams. Most recently, James was Vice President of Digital Video at National Geographic. He has built video teams and products for a slate of high-profile companies and is currently growing his own company, Digital Video Strategies. James, it's great to have you here with us.
Thanks, Will. It's great to be here.
So let's start very generally. Tell us about the big players in social media in 2018, who's on the rise, who's maybe slipping a little bit. And then also, I said in the intro, social media has to be a part of the business strategy. Sounds obvious, but maybe tell us why.
Sure. I think one thing to just start off with is to level set around social and video as well, and who those players are. And really, out of the gate, it's going to be Facebook is the obvious one.
Yep.
And Facebook is an interesting entity in this space because they have such a large audience and they have such a wide reach and they are constantly changing. So they just announced that they were going to restrict the amount of content that's going into folks' the news feed.
Right. If threw everyone into a fever of reaction, as I was aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about that is I think what they're doing there is doubling down on a sort of intrinsic truth around what digital media is. And this is one of the things that I tell my clients is important to understand and to focus on, which is digital media generally is about communities and it's about building communities up. And that's kind of what that Facebook change is going to do. So Facebook is definitely a big player this year. Instagram, also a big player. 75% of marketers are on Instagram now. 90% are on Facebook. So those are really the two entry points. There's a couple other players that are in this space, but a lot of it comes down to choosing a platform that your audience is on and then really focusing on that and making sure that you're putting the right resources against it.
Got it. And so we know, and you mentioned community is key when it comes to building that social media strategy. Tell us some of your thoughts on the importance of building community, how to go about doing that. It's easy to sort of say, well, we want to build a community, but it's tough to sort of get into the weeds of that. You mentioned different platforms also, and obviously there's different ages, different groups on these different platforms.
Right. So, and at the heart of digital, as I said, it's about community, and what that means for businesses in particular is to approach the content that you put out there in a way that will get community engagement. And that means getting people to talk about what it is that you're putting out there, the media that you're putting out there. It's not enough, for example, in my world, I focus a lot on video. It's not enough to just have a good video and put it up there. That video has to be targeted towards a specific audience to try and get a specific reaction out of that audience. And to do that, you really need to engage them. So the perfect video is something that's going to actually inspire a conversation. It's going to get the audience engaged. And as you start to build that community, you start to build more of a brand affinity. The thing about millennials is that they really want content that feels like it's made for them, and they want a relationship. They're willing to have a relationship with brands. You have to give them a reason to have that relationship. You have to show and express yourself as a brand to make it feel like you're part of their community. And if you do that well, you're going to get that audience response. And the interesting thing in today's world, where you're working with these various platforms and the algorithms that drive those, the more audience response you get, the more likely it is for those platforms to promote your content out there into their feeds.
So it keeps rolling along and building up more steam. And we talk about platform intentional content, and that's what you're talking about there, where you're choosing the right place to find the right audience.
Exactly right. So with when you think about the way that you use your own social media, you may be on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram all in the same 30-minute time slot. But with each one of those platforms, you're going to have a different psychological orientation going into those. You're going to have different expectations about the time you're going to spend on that platform, the kind of content that you're going to see. And you can't take something that is built for one platform and necessarily put it on a different platform and expect the audience to respond to that. So that's one of the things that I specialize in, is figuring out, one, who's your audience, where are they located, when are they located there, and then how do you tailor your content in order to make that content resonate with that audience on that platform. And that to me is one of the biggest and most interesting elements of digital. Things are constantly changing. Algorithms are changing. Platforms are changing. You're watching Facebook right now move from a platform that was built on short, snappy videos as sort of the king, and now they're moving into this other area where longer form content is starting to build out. Well, you have to choose, even within the Facebook ecosystem, where's your audience and how are you going to tell your story to that audience in the right place? At the end of the day, that's really what matters most, because if you do that right, you're going to get that community engagement. And that, again, is the heart of any relationship that any brand really should be looking to build.
All right. So then how do you go about figuring out where your audience is? I'm assuming the first obvious step is that, there's mountains of research regarding demographics and social media platforms, specific platforms. But can you get more granular in your approach? I'm sure you can, depending on the product or service you're providing.
Absolutely. So knowing who it starts really with understanding what it is that you want to achieve. You need a goal for any sort of strategy that you're putting out there. Starts with understanding why you're out there. So say once you have that goal, you can start to design a campaign and a video strategy or a social strategy around how to get that how to achieve that goal. And
so I like to use the landscape business as an example a lot, just because it seems like a business that doesn't necessarily need digital video or social media, but gosh, it sure can help. Right. So you want people to call you and you come over to your house and mow your lawn, et cetera.
Right.
So your goal is, in that case, drum up more business. Have people call you on the phone. It's not necessarily for people to watch all your videos, although maybe it is, right?
So if we're going to
Can I use that? Can I use that?
Absolutely.
All right, okay.
Let's
we can do something else if you want.
No, let's walk through that garden. So as you think you're offering the services of landscaping. So that means there's a certain clientele that you're going after. It's probably folks that are going to be a little bit older that are homeowners or somebody who runs a business that has that sort of presentation.
And they don't want to do it themselves.
They don't want to do it themselves. So they've got some amount of disposable income that they can put against that. So right there, you've already cut out a good chunk of your audience.
Forget Snapchat.
Well, right. Exactly. Those people probably aren't on Snapchat, and they're also not expecting that message to be on Snapchat.
Right.
Facebook would be a perfect place for that, because not only can you tell your story visually, and you can excite an emotional response from putting together a beautiful landscape. If you give people the opportunity to envision what your landscaping product in their house, they're more likely you're creating an emotional response and a connection to that audience. You get on Facebook and you can start targeting homeowners and people in the right demographics, in the right areas. If you're looking for a specific city, you can target specific cities. You can start to factor in all of these various elements to create a really targeted campaign. And what it comes down to is identifying a niche audience and programming specifically to them.
And does that mean spending money on Facebook to get those specific demographics?
Right. So a place where a couple of years ago maybe not as important, today it's critical to anytime you're thinking about designing a campaign, you've got to put some paid media spend behind it. You've got to boost your posts. And it
doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, right?
It doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, especially the more niche you get, you can, there's not as many people that you're trying to target. So it potentially doesn't, you don't have to run up huge budgets to get there, but it is something that's really important. And I want to make a distinction there, because you're hearing a lot in the news right now around fake accounts and buying views. And that's not what I'm talking about doing. I'm not saying make a video and then buy a bunch of views that are meaningless. What I'm saying is, once you know who your target audience is, design your content to meet that target audience. And that's where the power of your communication comes in. And that's why it's important to make sure that you can sort of cut through everything else and deliver that message directly to the consumer.
Thanks for mentioning that, because that is a big deal. And those are inflated numbers that businesses could use just to talk about their numbers, but it doesn't mean they're drumming up any extra business.
No. And all that's, it's easy to do. If you come to me and you say, I want to make a video with 1 million views, I can give you a number. It's like
I'm coming to you.
Yeah, but the thing
right.
At the heart of, at the end of the day, like, that's
needs to be real.
It's not valuable, right? And that's what you want to do, is you create value for both your client as well as the customer, and that's where you can really use social media and social video in particular, because that just happens to get a much better response from your audience. People engage with video more than and at least in Facebook more, and then it's true on Instagram too, that people will engage more with your content if it's moving, if it's video, and so it's a good tool to use to reach that audience.
You mentioned longer form video on social platforms as well. Let's talk about that a little bit. What that means, mid form, long form. I know LinkedIn has video now. We haven't talked a lot about LinkedIn yet, but what is longer form content?
So, right. So when I think about content, I think of basically it breaks into three different sections as you described. So short form is really, it's content that's under a minute long, and that could be 15-second videos back in the Vine days, 6-second videos. So just real short, snappy videos. You've got mid form, which I would say is maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then you've got longer form, which is basically anything 10 to 15 minutes on.
Okay.
There's a shift right now where, and you can see this happening with Facebook, where they are trying to get more and more and more long form content onto their platforms, and they're trying to change the way that people approach video on Facebook to adapt that. It's a fascinating experiment to watch play out, because we built video content based on a very short attention span, and Facebook is really trying to expand that out and bring folks in to help them do that. But that's sort of the future, I think, of a lot of these platforms. It's where they're trying to go, and I could spend a lot more time. Maybe that's another podcast, Will. But that whole other sort of intersection between where we are in digital media today and where I think we're going to end up in another year or two is pretty fascinating.
And that sounds like, if they're going for that longer form content, I mean, that's going head to head with Netflix and Amazon and all companies where people are subscribing and watching a lot of video.
Exactly.
Or cable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So then that's where it really starts to get interesting, is where you start to see the confluence of all these various types of media entering into into a single space. And suddenly you've got all these major publishers next to folks who maybe weren't major publishers a year ago, and suddenly they've got audience. So it's going to be a very, very, very interesting couple of years.
It seems daunting, but the point of this discussion today, we've thrown out a bunch of information, is that marketers, businesses, large, medium, small, can think through their strategy and make it focused and strategic, and a strategic strategy, but come up with something and a plan that really makes sense, and they're not wasting their time on platforms where they just don't need to be.
That's exactly right. So you have so many options, and a lot of people don't know, should I be on Facebook? Should I be on Instagram? I don't have a Pinterest account.
Right.
What I try to help folks do, and what I encourage folks to do, is just think about what it is that you're trying to achieve and just build your strategy back from that. And if you start doing that, things get a lot easier. You don't have to make as many decisions, and you'll have a better chance of getting the results that you're looking for.
And whether you're doing video on Facebook or you're on Twitter, and that's how you're spreading a message, or another platform, you can look at the results immediately.
Right.
It doesn't. I mean, you can shift that strategy and go another direction.
Exactly. And one of the great things about digital is that you get almost instantaneous feedback on what you're doing, and we didn't even get into that too much. But really, you at that point, once you've identified all of those other elements, you start programming to those. Then you can start testing it, A/B testing it, and start to figure out what's working, what's not. What are the signals that are buried within there that we should be following? What's not worth the time and the investment? And that's where a longer strategy is really helpful, because it gives you time to really hone that message and start to zero in on those results.
I assume there's times when a business doesn't need to do video. There's other ways of getting a message out there. You focus on video, but there are certainly the tried and true methods of being on social media and attracting a community and starting conversations that don't have to be video related.
Sure.
Or maybe it's just not in your wheelhouse, so to speak.
Well, what I would say is, again, it just comes down to what it is that you're trying to achieve. Absolutely. There may be times when you're trying to get a message across and your audience just isn't an audience that is looking for video in that area, and that's okay. It just so happens that video is one of the most impactful ways of communication. Yeah. So it tends to be something that it's why I'm in this business and why I love working in video, because it is so impactful, and you get to see the reaction of your audience and have that connection.
Well said. All right. Well, we certainly like the audio form of communication here, and the podcasts, which have been around for a long time. Full disclosure, James and I did a podcast, 25 years ago, before they started.
I don't know if it was quite that long.
30 years ago. Yeah. James, it's great to have you here with us. And if people would like to learn more about how you can help their business grow, where can they go?
They can go to dvsgo.com, so digitalvideostrategies.com. as well. So DVS Go, that's the winner. That's where they should take a look and see, and I'd be happy to help them out.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for your time. Really great information. If you'd like to learn more about the BBB, visit us at bbb.org. For the Better Business, Better Series podcast, I'm Will Johnson.
You just enjoyed Better Business, Better Series podcast. Be sure to tune in next month for a brand new episode. To learn more about our other shows, visit betterbusiness.blueberry.com. That's betterbusiness.blueberry.com and subscribe. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the Better Business Bureau, Council of Better Business Bureaus, or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Blueberry's Terms of Service.